2021 Academy Awards are just around the corner. Today we'll talk about the 8 nominees for Best Picture. Before we start off, a couple of notes. This is your warning now that there will be some spoilers in here. So if you haven't already, go ahead, watch these movies before you watch this video. But overall, I'm gonna do my best to not kill these plots for you. As we go through, I'm going to highlight what exactly I thought it was that made these movies so unique and great on their own. I'm also going to be making the case as to why each of these movies should win the award for Best Picture. And just to be clear about that, this is not why I would pick any of these movies to win. Rather, why somebody in the Academy would vote for them. Because in truth, I could care less who wins these awards. First up, Promising Young Woman. Promising Young Woman is a mix of a dark comedy and thriller starring Carey Mulligan as Cassie Thomas. Cassie is a vigilante who goes to clubs acting drunk and vulnerable to attract men who would try to pick her up and force themselves on her, all for them to realize she's perfectly coherent. The performance by Carey Mulligan is phenomenal. She strikes a very difficult balance of being intimidating, caring, and very sympathetic all at once. Now, the trailers have set this up as if Cassie is doing unspeakable acts to these men, but in reality, what she really does is simply show them a mirror, revealing to themselves the monsters that they are. Director and writer Emerald Fennell does a great job of tackling just about every possible angle of the toxic culture that surrounds sexual abuse in our world, from the actual rapists themselves to the justice system that allows it to continue to go on, the bystanders who don't understand or simply do nothing. Promising Young Woman does an excellent job of presenting its villains outside the norms than what is typically seen in Hollywood. Rapists are often depicted as the unassuming dorky type, the clean-cut type, and so on. Rather, the movie shows the horrific acts and viewpoints of women's body autonomy can be found, in fact, from anyone. When you think of Alison Brie, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Bo Burnham, you think of harmless, dorky, funny people, and each of them shows you their dark side. A dark side we tend to dismiss and grant immunity to. Why I think Promising Young Woman can get the nod here? It's a very well shot, well thought out, well paced movie that's extremely well casted. The topic of sexual abuse and the mistreatment of women is not always covered in this sort of depth and in this way in film. It's also a serious problem in Hollywood right now. It depicts these very real problems in the most realistic way we may have ever seen, something that our society generally doesn't want to even talk about. It's ingrained in our culture, and it can come from anyone. Following that up, we have The Father. Originally a play by writer and director Florian Zeller, The Father places Sir Anthony Hopkins as the lead, where he is beginning to lose his battle with dementia. The movie is all shot in the apartment or flat, as we are taken through the spontaneity and chaos of Anthony's life. It takes you on a winding journey, one that can throw you at times and then hit you so hard you almost want to stop watching. Like a lot of the nominees, its cast is so well-rounded. Sir Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman are both brilliant in this. Colman represents those that struggle to watch someone suffer, while our loved ones can at times resemble nothing of the person we remember. Her burden of caring for her father as his condition becomes less and less manageable for her as he berates everyone else in the film is truly, truly heartbreaking. Zeller's on-screen adaptation of the play is really a work of art. A story that is so hazy while simultaneously being so clear to all of us. Watching The Father, you get this artsy feel to it, and I think that will stand out. Up next is Mank. Mank is the story of Herman Mankiewicz as he scrambles to write Citizen Kane. Mank himself is portrayed by Gary Oldman, who, to no one's surprise, delivers another great lesson in acting. But the story is a bit more than just Mank himself. A lot of it is about the things going on around him, though he is heavily involved in all aspects. This includes the state of Hollywood during the Great Depression, an inside look at Hollywood's important figures and political beliefs at the time. As they flash backwards in time, you also begin to see the inspiration for Citizen Kane itself and its characters through the film as Mank saw it in his real world. But in Citizen Kane, Dorothy Comingmore, who is essentially Marion Davies, really drags Davies as a person through the mud. In Mank, Amanda Seyfried serves to almost rehab that tarnished image of Davies, from an unintelligent gold digger to the thoughtful person and talented actress she was. For me, one of the best things about Mank is how the sets, editing, and sound create this movie magic. The set design of Hearst Castle looks like the real thing. The noir look of the movie takes you back in time. Although for me, what's even better is perhaps the soundtrack. I will note there are a few historical inaccuracies, but it's a lot to cover. Mank can win this one for a couple of reasons. As I said, the look and the feel of the movie is so spot on. It's a movie about a monumental time in Hollywood's history, as well as a lot of its important figures. Typically, that's pretty hard for them to pass up. Now we have Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. Nomadland as a story is about as real as it gets in the industry. Based on the book Nomadland by Jesse Bruder, it's a story that centers around the forgotten people of the 2008 recession, which specifically affected older Americans so badly, eventually causing them to become nomadic people. It takes place in 2011 when a mine in Empire, Nevada was shut down, causing the tiny town to become a ghost town. Frances McDormand plays Fern, who guides us through the journey of her healing. Her late husband is gone, as well as her income. She is on a new course, living in her van, figuring out her new lifestyle and meeting new people along the way. As old friends come back into her life, Fern rejects the idea of going back to what is considered normal life. She's happy living in a more sustainable way, taking temporary jobs, just doing what's necessary and enjoying the world around her. Fern is a vessel that director Zhao uses to tell the story of these very real people. And when I say real, I'm being literal. The nomads you see in the movie have some scripted lines, yes, but these are real people living their lives. Bob Wells is playing himself. He has a YouTube channel that helps people adapt to this new way of living. Linda May is also real, and this story she tells Fern is a true story of her own life that she gives to us.
2008, and it was just tough. And I got to a really, really low point. And I thought about suicide, and I decided I was gonna go buy a bottle of booze, turn on the propane stove, and I was gonna drink that booze until I passed out. And if I woke up, I was gonna light a cigarette and I was gonna blow us all up.
Like in her other films, Zhao's cinematography gives the appearance of a documentary. Nomadland doesn't look like a movie. It doesn't feel scripted, even though it is. It is a sincere window into the lives of these people, their troubles, but also their joy and their community. Zhao's filmmaking separates itself from the rest. It's not just presented in a different way to the norms of the industry. It's completely its own thing. We go from one lesser-known community to another in the nominee of Sound of Metal. The movie uncovers the rarely depicted deaf and hard-of-hearing identity. Riz Ahmed puts his skills to the test as Ruben Stone, a drummer in a heavy metal band with his girlfriend Lou, played by Olivia Cooke. The two start out touring in their van as they are trying to achieve their dream of making it in the music industry until Ruben suddenly experiences rapid hearing loss. As a doctor gives him his diagnosis, he tells him he could potentially get implants to get some of his hearing back, but the treatment is extremely expensive. Ruben eventually goes off to live with a deaf community, although he's understandably very reluctant, especially as living in this community means leaving all contact with the outside world and the love of his life. This movie is focused solely on Ruben's perspective, as director Darius Marder uses close-ups and incredible sounds to capture the essence of the character and what he's going through. It's like you are Ruben. When you watch Sound of Metal, you react to things as Ruben does. Ahmed takes us through this frightening story of losing one's identity. Everything he loved and worked so hard for, his passion for music, his loving partner who is clearly everything to him, the life he built is so traumatically stripped away. You can see in his wide-eyed stare that any control he once had over his life is just slipping through his fingers. He has to rediscover himself, be introspective as he goes through the darkest period of his life. Even though many of us cannot understand what it's like to be hard of hearing or lose one of our primary senses suddenly, I think with the great work from everyone involved in this movie, we can easily put ourselves in Ruben's shoes. This movie is a great example that there is no true disability that makes us any lesser than those around us. There's a lot to love about Sound of Metal, but to save time, there are people like Riz Ahmed who can maybe explain a lot of these things better than I can. I was really blown away by the way this movie uses sound, but I'm not fully equipped to really tell you about all that stuff. So what I've done is given you a bunch of links in the description box below with a lot more people that can tell you a lot more about all these movies once we're finished this. As I go through all these movies, it seems crazy to think that anybody could pick one over the other. But as for Sound of Metal, I think this movie really wins on the sound design and the ability to take us into a character's experience so tangibly. It's groundbreaking in terms of the subject matter in how we talk about people with disabilities. We need more movies to talk about these kinds of people, underrepresented communities and the identities within them. Sticking with the theme of underrepresented people in Hollywood, the next nominee is Minari. Director Lee Isaac Chung based this story on memories of his own life growing up in America. A story of a family who originally came to America from Korea and have recently moved from California to Arkansas. The father, Jacob, played by Steven Yeun, wants to start his own business farming crops on his new land he just bought. Jacob is in search of something bigger after feeling inadequate for most of his life. Yeri Ham plays Monica, who's worried about her husband's headstrong ways, what it could do to him and the family as they battle through the movie. Monica and the kids struggle to find comfort in their new home. Shortly after they settle in, Monica's mother Sonja moves in with them. The daughter, Noel Cho's character, Anne, accepts her, having met her before, but David, portrayed by Alan Kim, completely rejects her. Her cooking, her foul mouth, overrules her incredible love for him, because David's ideals of what a grandmother should be clash with what she is. And that right there really is the theme of Minari. It's about this constant battle for acceptance, this family adopting a new home, trying to assimilate to a new country whilst keeping some of their own culture intact. Youn Yuh-Jung, who after doing some research I learned is a superstar in Korea, can really captivate you in this. Her fight for David's acceptance in the family, as well as the rest of the family's battle in their new community. Also, I've noticed not many people have been talking about Noel Cho's performance, partly most likely because of her little screen time, but I love the way she is the most steady and responsible person in the most chaotic of times for her and her family. Aside from the plot and the great actors, I really admire the minimalistic approach of this movie. The lack of background sound gives you an ability to grasp on to the uncomfortability in scenes like the church scene and the tension between Jacob and Monica's arguments. The emotion of these characters and all the stresses of their lives really permeating your screen. Minari is the type of story often disregarded in Hollywood, one I hope we begin to see a lot more of. So in summary, the reason why I think Minari can take home the award, the story of Asian immigrants coming to a new home, trying to start a new life in a world that simply doesn't accept them for who they are. Whether they come here to Canada, the United States, or elsewhere, they have been struggling in silence, specifically now in a time where Asian hate crimes are at an all-time disgusting high. Films like Minari can change that.
With a story like this, that I feel like, we purposely try to not skip those things, but rather go so deeply into them that what you get at the end is a relatable story to anyone cross-culturally. We might be able to see each other a little clearer, a little bit more human and be able to understand that, you know, it looks a little different, but it pretty much kind of feels the same.
Now we have The Trial of the Chicago 7. Directed by Aaron Sorkin, The Trial of the Chicago 7 is based on the historical trial in 1969 in which 8 defendants are charged with a conspiracy to start riot. The 8th defendant being chairman of the Black Panther Party, Bobby Seale, who somehow gets thrown into the trial, despite him not knowing any of the other men. Those other 7 men are Tom Hayden, Rennie Davis, David Dellinger, the Young International Party leaders Jerry Rubin and Abbie Hoffman, John Froines, Lee Weiner, all of which were anti-war activists who were in Chicago to protest the Vietnam War. The movie recaps the events of the trial as well as the events leading up to the riots themselves that involve some villainous acts committed by a militarized group you might know as the police. The trial itself is absolutely insane. Judge Julius Hoffman is a completely incompetent and insensitive judge who is shown through this film handing down charges for contempt of court. In fact, Hoffman actually handed out 175 counts of contempt of court through the 5-month trial. He also had a clear and obvious bias against the defendants, inhibiting their ability to defend themselves. Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin tried to disrupt the proceedings, realizing the losing battle they had on their hands, instead opting to use the trial to protest the horrible state of America's oppression and the Vietnam War. Chairman Bobby Seale was the target of racism through the trial, and he was denied his right to counsel as his lawyer was undergoing surgery. Judge Hoffman even denies the Black Panther Party leader's request to represent himself and question witnesses. The two jar back and forth, and it leads to the infamous scene where Chairman Bobby Seale is chained and gagged. While the film may seem exaggerated at times for the purposes of theater, on the contrary, most of it is true. In fact, Chairman Bobby Seale was actually gagged and restrained in court for days. But what could sway opinions even more is how prevalent it seems right now. This past year has really shown us that we are not so far from that time at all. I think despite the massive gap in years, people of our generation can really understand the trial of the Chicago 7. The protesting of the violence then represents what we have going on right now. Movies that touch on socio-political, economic hardships are almost always going to get the nod, and the Chicago 7 really does that, as do most of the nominees, as we've seen pretty clearly, and our last movie hits similar tones as well. Finally, we have Judas and the Black Messiah. Based in the exact same time period as the Chicago 7 timeline, we have the story of Chairman Fred Hampton. Now, for massive spoilers, if you aren't familiar, Judas and the Black Messiah is about the assassination of Black Panther Chairman Fred Hampton, played by Daniel Kaluuya, and the man who aided the FBI in doing so, William O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield. I think it's always been difficult to know what the Black Panther Party is and what it was trying to do in its early years. Through tons of propaganda, the bulk of information you can find on them was, and still largely is, mainly that they were communist terrorists. For me personally, knowing nothing about this specific story going in, I love that Shaka King was able to give us so much truth without needing to dramatize pretty much anything for the sake of story. Personally, this film was really illuminating for me, especially in Canada, where the Black Panther Party are pretty much never talked about. All the good things they did completely forgotten, giving children food and education, their fight for equality of all people, uniting them under one cause in the Rainbow Coalition as Chairman Fred does, and showing them their path to freedom. It's a heartwarming movie in that way, that shows historically what we as people can do when we come together. But of course, when someone shows people their path to freedom, it inevitably alerts the oppressor.
Our counterintelligence program must prevent the rise of a Black Messiah from among their midst, one with the potential to unite the communists, the anti-war, and the new left movement.
We don't fight 5 with 5, we fight 5 with 1.
This man.
You don't fight racism with racism, we're gonna fight
Frederick
us out there.
Allen Hampton.
We ain't gonna fight capitalism with black capitalism, we're gonna fight capitalism with socialism.
As in real life, the operation to take down this revolution is orchestrated by the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. Martin Sheen delivers a bone-chilling performance in this. Watching him on screen is almost unbearable. This is a man who was about as oppressive as they come. His joy of keeping minorities down and causing pain, his words, his coldness are terrifying to think anyone could be like this. And he will stop at nothing to make sure the people cannot take their freedom. But Sheen's great acting is not alone by any stretch. This movie is perfectly cast. Stanfield gives us a depiction of anxiety and paranoia unlike any other. He knows what he's doing is horribly wrong, but he feels it's the only thing he can do in order to survive. When he's caught between the threat of the Panthers and the FBI, he's got no good outcome. Kaluuya is inspiring as Chairman Fred Hampton. I looked into more of the chairman's speeches in researching this, and aside from coming away just completely moved by the man he was and the message he had, I was struck by how remarkably Kaluuya was able to emulate not just the voice, but the pacing, the tone, and the body language, the spirit of the man. You can really tell that Kaluuya is not just a master of performance art, but also clearly has Chairman Fred in his heart. I would love to get into more, but I'm sure this video has gone on long enough for you. And I'm a little bit out of my depth, to be completely honest with you, and I don't want to keep talking about a subject that I still need to do a lot of research on. Judas and the Black Messiah wins based on the authenticity of the film. Nearly everything we've looked at today are true stories or stories retold in the form of theater. But Shaka King has done a masterful job at taking us back in time to feel the pain of the people that were experiencing it while still staying faithful to the history. That's all the nominees, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like for us. Once again, I just want to confirm that I really don't care who wins. I just don't care about awards in film, just a personal opinion of mine. I just hope everyone enjoyed these movies as much as I did. For me, this really didn't feel like work at all. Of course, I know the subject matter in a lot of these movies is really difficult for some people, and as with pretty much everything I do, I've done a lot of research, and I hope that my verbiage and my terminology was okay and didn't offend anybody, because obviously that's not my intention. But please let me know if I did make any mistake, because I want to make sure that I don't do it again in the future. So thank you very much. Make sure to subscribe to Lingo News for more, and I'll see you in the next one.